with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Ring Rees-Mogg. Put your calls to Jacob Rees-Mogg now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Good morning, 3 minutes after 9, Monday the 29th of April. It is Ring Rees-Mogg with Conservative Jacob Rees-Mogg. Your calls and questions in just a moment. But of course, unless you're thinking that we're going to be talking solely about those European elections, which have generated a lot of newsprint, there are the local elections coming ahead of that. That's indeed this Thursday. Jacob Rees-Mogg, welcome to the studio. Good to have you here, Mr. Rees-Mogg.
Pleasure to be here, thank you.
Thank you. The Conservative peer and political analyst, formerly Robert, now Lord Hayward, is suggesting that around 800 Tory councillors could lose their seats. Helen Whately, I'm afraid I don't know which, vice chair of the party, telling Sky News there's a difficult night. The voters would kick the government. How big a kicking might be on the way?
Well, Lord Hayward is a very distinguished psephologist. He knows what he talks about. He doesn't have any bias in it. Very often parties say we'll lose lots and lots of seats so that they can then say, oh, we didn't do quite as badly as expected. The sort of expectation management business. Lord Hayward isn't in that. He's putting it forward as he reads it, and he's a highly capable pollster. So I would have thought that what he's saying is realistic.
That's 1 in 6, roughly, being wiped out. Some good men and women losing their posts, Mr. Rees-Mogg. Some very decent folk.
That's the thing to have to remember, Mr. Ferrari. And people, I hope, will think as they go to the polling station that this is about their council tax, it's about their bin collection, it's about their road maintenance. It's not about Brexit. And I completely understand why people are fed up with the Tories over Brexit, that we haven't had any proper leadership. It's been indecisive and weak, and we've been led by the nose by the European Union. But that's not what these elections are about, and it'd be very sad if very good councillors lost because of Brexit-related muddle.
And lastly on this, when your Conservative colleague Boris Johnson says in his column in the Daily Telegraph today, and I'm brutally subbing or shortening this, please don't take your anger out on Conservative councillors, presumably you're in accord with Mr. Johnson.
I completely agree with that. I think it's the right approach. It's a slightly pious hope, because we know that people in elections vote more on national than on local issues, but that may be put to people's disadvantage when their council tax goes up and they discover quite how wasteful the Labour Party can be with government and council expenditure.
And you're nothing if not a loyal Conservative. What have you experienced canvassing over the last week or so?
Well, in North East Somerset, when I've been out, people have been very friendly. Obviously, people want to talk to me about the Brexit issue because I've been on your show and they've heard my views thanks to you. But people are more concerned about the European elections in this issue than the local elections. I got the feeling that quite a number of people are staying with us, but quite a number of people are probably going to stay at home.
And what would be a fatal blow for Mrs May? What number would be absolutely catastrophically unmanageable?
Well, the rules of the Conservative Party are that she is in place and there can't be a vote against her until December. And the Prime Minister is very capable of staying in place.
So Graham Brady had a fresh look at that, though, didn't he, last week, as I understand?
He did, and I was sympathetic to the decision not to change the rules. I think we are British, after all, and changing the rules halfway through never looks particularly fair. That doesn't exclude the Prime Minister deciding of her own accord that the time is up, and of course she said she will go if her deal goes through, and she said she will go before the next general election. So she's already making it clear that she's not, in Margaret Thatcher's famous phrase, going on and on and on.
Shall we go to the calls? Bradley's in Hornchurch. Bradley, you're through to Jacob Rees-Mogg. Go ahead. Good morning.
Oh, good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Bradley.
Morning, Jacob. So my question to you is, if you believe in Brexit, why don't you defect to the Brexit Party?
Well, I do believe in Brexit. Firmly, I believe and truly in Brexit. I think it's hugely in the interest of the country, will increase our prosperity and, most importantly, restore democratic control. I think the numbers in the House of Commons are not sympathetic to it, that we have about 200 MPs who are keen for Brexit and 450 who are, to a greater or lesser extent, against it. And that's what we have to work with. And so a protest vote for the Brexit Party...
Ah, but he's saying defect.
Oh, well, defect.
Imagine what you, Jacob... Imagine the headlines. They would reverberate around the world. They'd be running special editions.
You're flattering my vanity. I don't think this is realistic at all. And also, politics is not about the headlines.
Well, it would lead the bulletins, I'm telling you
personally,
that.
Well, it would lead the bulletins in the lunatic asylums if I did that. I greatly respect Nigel Farage, and I fully understand what my sister, Nunziata, is doing in supporting them. But I don't think it's the right way to do it. I think the Conservative Party has to be the party that delivers Brexit, and that I think that if we get to an election, a general election, with the vote split between a Conservative Party and a Brexit Party, all that does is allow Jeremy Corbyn in, who doesn't deliver Brexit at all, because the Labour Party is quite hostile to it. So what we need to do is ultimately reunite the Conservative Party, but that's a little way off at the moment.
Quick response from you, Bradley. Bradley?
Well, it's not just about the Brexit, is it? It's about democracy in general, and the Conservative Party and the Labour Party are not even delivering democracy. So it's not just about Brexit, it's about the attitude of the politicians today who clearly don't feel that our word or our vote is important enough for them to carry it through after promising it over 100 times.
Bradley, I entirely agree with you. I think we are in the situation of Parliament against the people, and I think democratically that is entirely unsatisfactory, and that it needs to change. And there are a number of MPs who said they would back the result, they would implement it, who have done the precise reverse. And I think this feeling that politicians is disconnected from the voters is a very strong one. I think Bradley's absolutely right.
Bradley, thank you for that. You might have seen yesterday, Mr. Rees-Mogg, in the Sunday Times, Conservative campaign headquarters threatening to expel any member or elected representative backing Nigel Farage's Brexit party. Is that the right course to take?
I think if members of the party vote in a ballot where nobody knows their vote for the Brexit party, they can't be expelled. But members of Parliament, Conservative elected officials, clearly have to support the Conservative Party. That's not unreasonable.
And local councils as well.
And local councillors. They're elected on a Conservative ticket. What somebody like me has to remember, and local councillors have to remember, that we're not elected because of who we are as individuals. If we want to do that, we could stand as independents. We're elected because we have a Conservative sign on our ballot paper. And therefore the Conservative Party is entitled to expect us to support Conservatives in other elections. Look, out of brotherly loyalty, I would very much like to support my sister, yes, but I can't, other than if I were to leave the Conservative Party, and that I think is completely fair.
Yes, okay, even if she loses.
My sister is very brilliant and is at the top of the list in the Midlands, in the East Midlands thing, so I think she's got a very good chance, but I would vote Conservative.
How sad were you to see Anne Widdecombe leave the Conservative Party after 55 years?
Very sad, but I don't blame her. I mean, I think we're in a position where
If you don't blame her, why don't you go?
Because I'm a Tory to my fingertips.
Well, she's not.
She has come to a different decision. I think abandoning...
You're both about as blue as each other, aren't you?
I think abandoning the Conservative Party at this stage is completely the wrong thing to do. I think we need to get the Tory Party back to doing what it needs to do, which is delivering Brexit, and perhaps occasionally saying a Conservative thing, not like the Chancellor of the Exchequer saying having high taxes and making people dislike them is a good thing and a good sign. I mean, I think that's not Conservative policy at all.
I'm allowed to show no favour, so I must just say a whole range of candidates are standing in the East Midlands, notwithstanding your position, Mr. Rees-Mogg.
And Conservative ones who are very good.
And many, and they're all details on the LBC website. There are fine folk, men and women, running there. Why don't we go to the West Midlands, to Oldbury? Ranjit, you're on the radio. Your question to Jacob Rees-Mogg. Ranjit, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mogg.
Good morning, Ranjit. Thank you for calling.
Okay, no problems. I just want to know, have you and your party put party politics before running of the country? That's how it seems to me.
Just in a sentence, why do you say that in the way we find ourselves with Brexit? Just so that I can clarify it for Mr. Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, not just about Brexit, just about the infighting about who's going to be the next leader, who isn't going to be the next leader. And he's just said now, Anne Widdecombe, after 55 years, I'm not going to put words into his mouth, but she's left the Conservative Party. There must be a reason.
Okay.
What does he think his reason is? Is it that the party's broken?
Okay.
Ranjit, thank you for the question. The issue really is, how do you think the country's interest is best served? That the Conservative Party is a means to an end. It's about ensuring that the country is well governed and that the basis on which it's governed is sensible. I think splitting the Conservative Party makes the good government of the country less likely. and therefore I have an intrinsic loyalty to the Conservative Party and want to make it work. And so, no, it's not putting party ahead of country. It's recognising that the interest of the country needs a strong Conservative Party. And yes, I'm very sad that Anne Widdecombe has left. She is a formidable, capable campaigner and a really very wonderful woman.
Ranjit, thank you. Can we move to other matters? Mr. Rees-Mogg, you are in a unique position because I think you tried journalism and you come from a long and distinguished lineage of journalism, and of course you are a practising politician. So when the Huawei story broke last week of this leak, I have to say that I actually, and I've been taken a lot of flack over this, within reason, welcomed that, because I think there are some times when leaks, as an old journo in every sense of the word, are to be welcomed. Where stands Jacob Rees-Mogg?
No, I agree with you. I speak to Steve Swinford, the journalist who broke it on the Telegraph, quite regularly, though, about Brexit matters rather than these matters. I don't know, have the inside track on them. He got a fantastic scoop. He deserves a great deal of credit for that. It's completely proper journalism. But there is
you're at odds with quite a few senior Conservatives who talk about criminal inquiries and God knows what else.
When politicians talk about criminal inquiries, it usually means they've done something wrong and they want to cover it up. The whole story here is not about a leak. It's about whether or not we're getting into bed with a Chinese company, Huawei, against the advice of the US and the Australians who have decided not to. This is a fundamental issue of national security. It's really, really important at that level. Whether somebody mentioned it in passing and leaked it is trivial in comparison. This is not, in terms of the leak, about national security. It's about national security in terms of the decision. And what worries me is that the Cabinet Secretary, who's getting very excited about the leak, is focusing on the wrong issue. And I'm afraid I don't approve of Cabinet Ministers being told to hand over their telephones. I think in this country we have a principle that you are innocent until proved guilty, and that making widespread investigations without evidence on specific figures seems to me to be wrong, and Cabinet Ministers deserve similar protections to everybody else.
I know you appreciate the distinction, but just so my listeners are clear, of course, I know you appreciate them, this isn't a cabinet meeting, this is national security, this is MI6, this is M, this is whoever it might be, thinking that I'm in a closed room, I can have conversations, I can almost talk about who my key spy in China is, and then it's going to appear on the front page of the Daily Mirror, or wherever it might appear.
Well, I don't think that's right. That's not what's going to appear. What has come out is about Huawei, about a company that is at the centre of political controversy and whether it's going to be eligible for contracts. That's a routine matter. That's not a matter of national security.
Leak.
Well, you can't say that everything in a meeting is of the same level of security, can you? Some things are and some things aren't.
Sure.
Some things are made public. We didn't used to know who the head of MI5 was, or of MI6. It all used to be kept very quiet. Now the government wheels them out when it's convenient to tell us that Brexit will be a disaster and think that sort of stuff. I mean, they use the secret services as part of the propaganda machine when convenient. And when it's something they don't like, suddenly it's national security and people could have 2 years in prison. Knowing that we're doing this with Huawei is really important, potentially an issue of deep national security. And actually the fact we know that is a good thing, and the journalist who reported it deserves an award for journalistic endeavour rather than any criticism.
And if you were a member of that council or committee and you were requested to hand over your mobile phone, what would your response be?
Well, I'm not, but I would instinctively refuse. I don't think the Cabinet Secretary has the right. He doesn't have police powers. And I don't think our senior political figures should be treated in this way. They are Privy Councillors. They have taken oaths of loyalty to the Queen.
Do we
and
have
to
an
the
Official
country.
Secrets Act, Mr. Rees-Mogg?
We have, and the police can investigate. Police have different powers, but the Cabinet Secretary is not a is not a constable. He doesn't have that warrant.
No, but it's okay to leak a secret.
Well, it's obviously okay to leak some secrets. That must be true. That sometimes leaking the secret. Think of all the secrets given to Winston Churchill in the 1930s in relation to rearmament in Germany and the speed of aircraft production in Germany, which are incredibly useful in answering the appeasers, and of course which the government then was very against, because the government doesn't like secrets that are embarrassing to it being revealed.
And this is embarrassing.
It's very embarrassing.
Lastly, are you nervous about, when I say the Chinese, I don't mean the whole Chinese people, I don't mean about, but you know what I'm saying generally.
We want to be careful of getting into troubles Roger Scruton got into for...
telecoms giants from China.
Of course we should be careful about telecom giants from China who are very closely linked to the Chinese state. The Chinese state is all-encompassing in a way the British state and the US state is not.
Let's go to other matters. Angelica is in Hampstead and you're through to Jacob Rees-Mogg. Go ahead, Angelica. Good morning.
Hello, good morning. I just want to ask, I'm an ethnic minority Muslim woman born in the UK. Why should I be happy to allow a state visit from Donald Trump, who is not only offensive and disrespectful to people like me and disregards the rights that this country has given me, and you say that you listen to the people of this country?
Did you object to the visit by President Xi of China?
Well, I don't really know much about him.
Okay, well, he persecutes Muslims and he persecutes Christians with equal vigour.
Do two wrongs make a right, Mr. Rees-Mogg? I'll just join in on your behalf, Angelica.
Okay, it's realpolitik. We have to deal with the leaders of foreign countries. We're not endorsing them. But Mr. Trump has a democratic mandate as the leader of our closest ally, and it is important...
Exactly. Because he's the closest ally. Why?
Why is the US our closest ally? Because we have enormous interests across the world. The security provided by NATO today, American ships going through the Taiwanese Strait as a reminder of the freedom of international waterways. This is really important. We have so much in common with the US. They are our closest ally. And it's not for us to second-guess the American electorate. At least he's elected, unlike President Xi.
Lastly...
But because he's the closest person to us, and because he has, he's more important to Great Britain, why would you then allow someone who's offensive to more than half of the British population? Why would you then encourage his behaviour, his beliefs and his attitude?
I just have to challenge, Angelica, before I bring Mr. Rees-Mogg in, how do you know more than half of the British population are offended by Donald Trump?
Because 67 million, that's the population of Great Britain. 50% of that is women. Women are more than men, and then we have to add in the...
Okay, I will come back to it. It's a bit of assumption to accept that virtually every woman in the whole of the United Kingdom is opposed to Donald Trump. Anyway, Angelica, let's hear from Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Well, we know that one woman isn't, because Theresa May issued the visit, so she can't be opposed to it. Angelica, right. I don't think your statistics stack up, I'm afraid. I don't think more than half the population are opposed to this. But I actually think it is in the British national interest that we have a good relationship with whoever happens to be the leader of the United States. I disagreed politically with much of what Barack Obama had to say. I greatly disliked his trying to bully us in the Brexit referendum. But he was still a very important contact for the UK, and we needed to treat him well and favourably. And I think that is an important principle of British diplomacy.
Last point for you, Angelica, and I'm not trying to catch you out. Do you know why President Trump is in Europe?
Well,
no, that doesn't matter. That's my job. That's not. So no, don't worry. That's my job. It's to mark 75 years since the Normandy landings, in which over 6,000 American service personnel lost their lives alongside British, Canadians, Australians, all sorts of other people. And it's to mark that. As a result of that, should he not be afforded a welcome, Angelica?
No, because he's still offended people in this country. If he's going to come to see, what you've just said,
yes.
What about the people that he's offended?
Okay, Angelica, thank you. Just on the final point on this, thank you for your call, Angelica. Hope to talk to you again soon. Well, points very well made. Your view of John Bercow, who's A, decided that he doesn't want Donald Trump to address Parliament, which is par for the course, we heard that before. B, it would appear he doesn't want to attend the state banquet either at Buckingham Palace.
Well, I don't know whether he's refused an invitation.
It is reported that.
It is reported that. The Speaker is not an automatic invitation to state functions. Those very often invited, as I understand it. This has nothing to do with Mr. Bercow. It's to do with Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker represents the House of Commons. He does not represent himself. If he has an invitation from the Queen, he has a duty to accept it.
So he should go.
Of course, if he's invited, of course he should. This is nothing to do with the Speaker's personal views. As Speaker of the House of Commons, he represents the House of Commons.
So if the reports are right, he's wrong.
If the reports are right, it is an error of judgment.
Yes. And lastly, can he deny the President addressing Parliament? Because the Lord Speaker, Norman, now Lord Fowler, has different views.
This is a very difficult question.
I'm glad I've asked this one.
How the House...
I think if I was bowling at you, I think you've just edged a slip, haven't you?
Well, I may end up...
Well, certainly it's come out as a googly, that one, isn't it?
It has indeed. It's a very good ball to bowl, because the governance of the Houses of Parliament is extremely complex. It is not exclusive to the Speaker, it's not exclusive to the Lord Speaker, it's also the Lord Great Chamberlain. And between the three of them, they have to agree. There were agreements made some decades ago. It all used to be run essentially by the Lords, and the Commons eventually got fed up with that, and it used to be run, because it is still a royal palace with royal household involvement. it's become more committified. And therefore, to say who runs the Houses of Parliament is one of those questions like Henry Kissinger saying, who do I ring up when I want to speak to Europe, to which there is no great answer.
Right.
Could people really push it through and do it in spite of Mr. Speaker? I suppose they could, but it's using political capital which probably can be spent on better things.
OK, final question. Do you think the President has a right to address Parliament?
Well, nobody has a right to address Parliament, but should we invite our closest ally...
Should he be afforded the opportunity so to do?
Of course he should. And look, go back to Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker was very effusive when Aung San Suu Kyi came to speak to Parliament. And I was there, and we all thought how marvellous this was. What a wonderful and brave woman. And there's a lot of truth in that. But then we know how the Rohingyas are being treated in Burma, and we see that there's another side to Aung San Suu Kyi, and that nobody is perfect. We have international relations with many countries. It's not for us to judge their leaders. Donald Trump, our closest ally, elected by the American people. Of course we should invite him.
Shall we go to other matters? Helen in Hemel Hempstead. Hello, Hemel Hempstead. Helen, you're through. You're through to Jacob.
Hello, Nick.
Hello, madam. You're through to Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Hello, Helen.
I'd like to ask you what your thoughts are about stopping fracking due to the damage it's obviously doing to the land, etc. Are you in favour of sort of stopping it and getting other types of energy, green energy, like solar panels, etc.?
Well, solar panels I'm in favour of, and I think it's been a mistake to have tariffs to support inefficient photovoltaic cell makers in Germany rather than cheaper ones in China. But in terms of fracking, no, I think the evidence for fracking is that it is a safe technology and provides us with a secure and cheap source of fuel that is less polluting than other forms of fossil fuels.
Response from you, Helen?
Actually, it's not just the vibration, etc., that bothers me. It's the use of water. Water is going to be very scarce in the future, probably more valuable than oil eventually. And the fracking companies use millions of gallons of drinking water to compress the fractures, and they add very dangerous chemicals, carcinogenics. And I think probably the shale gas will eventually be of less interest than the water. We've been given different ways of saving water, like don't leave the tap running when you're brushing your teeth. And
OK, let's get Mr. Rees-Mogg in.
Well, first of all, the chemicals they put in the water are chemicals you would find in your kitchen. They're not these very dangerous chemicals. The seismic activity is less than you notice if a bus goes past your front door.
0.5 on the Richter scale. And just to put in relevance, in the US and Canada, respectively, it has to hit 4.5 or 4 dead before they get any concerns. Continue, Mr. Rees-Mogg.
And so far, the seismic activity from fracking is less than you get from rockfalls in a disused coal mine. You know, so the seismic evidence is being misused to try and stop fracking. The water is recycled. So yes, a lot of water is used, but it's mainly in a closed circuit. It's cleaned and sent back again. So yes, there is water use, but there's a lot of water usage in industry, and that's important. We need to have fuel, and we need to have clean fuel. Bear in mind, in the United States, carbon dioxide emissions have collapsed because of fracking, because shale gas is much less emitting of carbon dioxide than other fossil fuels. So it's got green benefits.
Helen, thank you. Does this put you at odds with someone who's been called almost a modern-day Joan of Arc? I speak of Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old Swedish eco-activist. Are you totally at odds with her?
I'm neither at odds with her or for her. I wish her well, but I don't think the government is going to be run by an intelligent 16-year-old.
Yes. Were you surprised the level of welcome that she was afforded last week?
People are using her for their political interests.
There's not genuine motivation by Michael Gove when he says he was admonished.
I haven't paid close attention to what Michael said, but
he felt ashamed
his discussions
because he's not done enough.
Well, I think that's political speak, to be perfectly honest.
By Mr. Gove?
I would have thought so, yes.
Yeah.
He's a great man, but he's also a politician.
And Labour introducing a climate change emergency bill this Wednesday, which would make Britain a world... I've asked so many people what it actually means in practical terms. Does it mean diesel cars will have to be burnt by Tuesday afternoon? I've no idea what it means, but will you be voting in favour of this Labour motion?
No. The thing is...
so climate change isn't?
The climate change is important, and or changes to the temperature are important, but there are technological solutions, and our use of fuel has got much, much cleaner over the years, over the centuries, indeed. It's very interesting. Gladstone thought we would run out of coal in 1968. And indeed, yes, he did. And was very worried about it, quite
understandably.
Long-term political thinking. And yet we didn't, because we'd moved on to other things. Technology helps. Solar power, all sorts of things, but fracking is part of that, and it's cleaning things up, but it's not. We're not going to get to a better environment by making people live miserable lives, making their fuel much more expensive, or making them go back to cave dwelling. It's unrealistic, and actually cave dwelling was pretty damaging to the environment.
And were you angry the way much of London was brought to a standstill? I mean, it's moving again now, but it's fair to say much of the previous 2 weeks has been pretty tricky in parts of London.
I'm not by nature a very angry person. I thought that the right to freedom of expression and the right to protest was taken out of hand. I don't think that includes the ability to glue yourself to buildings or to scrawl messages on roads or to obstruct traffic. Were the police right to act at the pace that they did? Well, let's see. As long as from now on they ensure that the streets of London are kept open.
They might need tougher powers, Mr. Rees-Mogg.
I think they've got all the powers they need.
The Public Order Act of 1986 is enough.
The Public Order Act, but you can always injunct.
We've got time for one more question, one from me, one from Mark in Hitchin. Mark, your question. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Jacob, Shameen Begum, I understand that you might be objecting to the fact that she...
Just to remind my listeners, she's the so-called runaway jihadi bride who is currently in a refugee camp. Sadly, she's had but has lost 3 children. She's seeking to return because she is British by citizenship. Back to you, Mark, for your question.
My question is, Jacob, I believe that you might have raised issues or concerns about her claiming legal aid. And also, do you not think it's important that judgment is challenged on the basis that if it stands that she could claim citizenship of another country, that will mean that the majority of the population of Northern Ireland who automatically attain British citizenship and Irish citizenship could actually have their British citizenship removed and instructed to move to the south of Ireland.
That's a very good point, but you're wrong on what I've said about Miss Begum. I have been very concerned about the removal of her citizenship. I think she is a British responsibility, and I believe that she is correctly being given legal aid, that we have a principle of innocence until proved guilty in this country, and I think taking away a passport by purely administrative act with no judicial oversight is not just. So I think, Mark, to be fair to you, you're assuming that I have the views that most Eurosceptics and most Conservatives do have, but this is one of the views I don't have in common with a lot of people I agree with on other things. I believe that a British citizen ought to be protected, and that means that you have the full protection of the law, and if you've committed offence you can be charged, but you are our responsibility, not Bangladesh's responsibility. And I think your point on the Republic of Ireland is absolutely beautiful. I hadn't thought of it, and it's one of those sort of gloriously improbable thoughts that runs a great hole through one aspect of government policy. So, Mark, thank you for that.
Mark, you had the last word from the callers. Quick one from me. Your Conservative colleague, Damian Green, possibly thinking the unthinkable, is talking about how millions of over 50s could be paid to pay more regards to national insurance. There is, as you and I have spoken before, there is a social care crisis. Is Mr. Green to be applauded for what he's doing? Because I doubt it's going to prove very popular in some quarters.
Damian Green certainly to be applauded for raising this issue. He's a highly intelligent, thoughtful man and understands the issues, and you were interviewing him earlier. And he's quite clear that this isn't a new tax that he's proposing. There is a fallback of a new tax. I think getting people to save for social care in the way they save for pensions is a really interesting idea. The key to saving for pensions is you need to start very early. So whether it should be part of the amount that is tacked on, taken away from people's earnings or taken from their employer, so it starts at an early age, and then there's a pot of money that is yours that can be used for social care should it be necessary. I think that's a very interesting idea, and Damian's a very thoughtful man and well worth listening to.
So as well as NI, we might have a pension charge.
We already do. But it's the key to the new pension charge that employers have to pay for their employees, which has been rolled out over the last few years. The key to that is that it's your money. Whereas with national insurance, of course, it's the government's expenditure. It goes in the general pot, whereas this charge remains. And therefore, if you don't spend it, at the end, it can be inherited by your children. If you don't need social care, you can spend it on other things. So I think that's a better way of going. I also think people are better at looking after their own money than the government is at doing it for them. The government record with national insurance is they've always pinched the money for whatever it's been needed for.
Thoroughly enjoyed our time together. We have to call it a close there. Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you. Here on Ring Rees-Mogg on LBC, 9:33 News is next.
Jacob Rees-Mogg has told LBC a possible leak from the National Security Council is trivial in comparison to concerns about Huawei. A Whitehall inquiry is underway after reports emerged